Okay. So, good evening, Fritz. Good evening, Sam. Good evening, everybody that's joining. Thank you so much. What we are discussing tonight is a very hot topic, and I've actually last minute decision to do it because it's come up in a lot of conversations with the whole discussion that we're talking about of Roe versus Wade in America and this big Supreme Court decision that the Supreme Court came at, basically saying that the federal law allowing abortion and taking away the court from the states is no longer law, and or basically abolishing that law. I'll to be honest, I didn't look very deeply at the law from Roe versus Wade, but it's caused a big discussion in around the world, as big decisions in America often do. And abortion is of course a very, very big and very serious topic. So I think when you talk about the fact that so many people are potentially affected by the concept of abortion, I would think that most people have some type of an opinion about it. And usually that opinion would either be based on experience, or that opinion is based on the what you hear in the news and what you hear in the media. And that's probably where most people get their opinions from. And today it's social media, which is a different type of media, what people say in their homes and things like that. So I think it's really important to bring a Jewish perspective onto this, because unlike many other things, Judaism always looks at things a bit different. Okay, so the case in America, which was, from my understanding, basically saying that just like before the Roe versus Wade case, it was decided by the states, and now it goes back to being decided by the states. And therefore, if a state decides that they want to allow abortion, then that would be up to them. And if they wanted to make it prohibited, that would be up to them as well. Now, it's an interesting situation, but it also is, I suppose for some people feel like it's something that allows us to have a lot more flexibility within, and sometimes more fair for the way Jewish law would fit. So let's look at a few texts and then we'll make some type of decision. Now, I want to put you on to Jewish law generally. If you were to think about it, would you think that Jewish law has a different of opinion between abortion for Jews and abortion for non-Jews? What would you think? Just a quick question for you to start thinking. You would think not, Noah. Fritz, right. What would you say? Not.
I don't think so.
You don't think so. Sam, you also think that you would think not.
I agree with.
Okay. I understand that you haven't necessarily studied the subject, but I want to share what you think, because what actually is surprising is that according to some opinions, there's actually a difference in law whether the person that is doing the abortion or the lady is actually Jewish, or the person that does the abortion is Jewish or not. And that's one thing to consider. And interestingly enough, if I've just told you that there's a difference, who do you think the difference is? Who do you think would be more strict, with a Jew or with a non-Jew when it comes to abortion? If I were to say, you would think there's with a Jew, which would be more strict with a Jew.
But why is non-Jews an issue here? Non-Jews have nothing to do with Jewish law. They're not bound by Jewish law. So why is it an issue?
Okay, good. So here's the question. Non-Jews are not bound by Jewish law, but however, there are still laws in the Torah that are given for non-Jews as well. There are 7 Noahide laws. 7
But
laws.
it doesn't include abortion.
One of them is murder. So if you were to say that murder is included in abortion, if you would say that abortion is murder, if you would say that, I'm not saying that just yet, I'm trying to keep this open-minded. If you were to say that, then you would be saying that it is included in the law for non-Jewish people as well. So Judaism, so the Torah doesn't give laws for non-Jewish people per se. It does give us laws for non-Jewish people. Those are 7 laws. 7 laws generally that they should believe in a higher power of God. They should believe in God. They shouldn't serve idols. They shouldn't murder. They shouldn't steal. They shouldn't commit acts of forbidden sexual conduct. They should set up courts of justice. Okay. Now, if you're going to include those laws, I forgot one. Do not take a limb from a living animal. So you're allowed to kill an animal, but you're not allowed to take a limb from a living animal. So if you were to think about those laws, those 7 laws actually, in certain cases, because those are the only 7 laws that non-Jewish people are obligated in according to the Torah, they're sometimes actually stricter than Jewish law for what the Jewish people are commanded. So how do we know when it's for a Jew and when it's for non-Jew? There's a difference. So I'll show you a source quickly. So the source I'm showing you is from the book of Bereshit, the book of Genesis, chapter 9, verse 6. Now, this is before the Torah was given. So we know generally that when laws are given before the Torah is given, then we know that these laws apply to all people. And generally speaking, Adam was given 6 principal laws, 6 laws that applied to him. Okay? And those 6 laws that applied for Adam was for all mankind. Then there was a law then that said that you weren't allowed to Adam was forbidden to eat animals till after the flood. After the flood, what happens is God tells Noah he is now allowed to eat. Human beings are allowed to consume animals. However, now the laws of killing people becomes much stricter, taking limbs from animal. So Noah is given a 7th law, which is even though you're allowed to kill an animal, you're not allowed to harm an animal. You're not allowed to take a limb from a living animal. Is that clear? So the 7th law is added only to Noah. However, the law against murdering is already given to Adam. So we know, so let me just clarify what I'm saying. Laws that were given to Adam and Noah apply to all people. Laws afterwards given by Moshe Rabbeinu, by Moses, apply only to Jewish people. Is that clear? That's how we figure out the laws of the 7 Noahide laws, what we call the 7 Noahide laws, and Noah is given. They call the Noahide laws because Noah had all 7, even though Adam had the first 6 in any case from Adam. So they could have been called the 6 Adamite laws and the 7th Noahide law. But for some reason we call them the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, that the children of Noah were commanded. Okay. So if you look at this verse over here, verse 6, this is given already to Adam. It says, Shofech dam ha'adam ba'adam, domo yishafech, ki b'tzelem elokim asa et adam. It says, whoever sheds human blood, by human hand shall that one's blood be shed, for in the image of God was humankind made. So we know over here there's a law against shofech dam ha'adam, against shedding human blood. However, the wording is the way it's translated is not exactly correct. Okay, if you were to look at the words over here, look over here. Shofech dam ha'adam ba'adam. Apologies. I'll just close that because it might get a bit confusing. For some reason, not gonna open to it. Well, the wording over here, he spills blood of man in man. So the commentary said, what does it mean spilling blood of man in man? You spill the blood of man. What in man? So tells us the Talmud. So the commentaries say that's talking about when there's a fetus. The Talmud goes on to say that's talking about ubar b'mei imoy. It's talking about a fetus in its mother's womb. And therefore, a fetus inside the mother's womb is not allowed to be killed. And if that person is killed, then it's considered murder. Okay? So based on this would come out that for mankind, in general, we would say that a person that kills a fetus, unborn fetus, it would be considered as if it is murder. Now, we would understand this to be talking about if a person was killed, probably with on purpose and purposeful. So you could possibly come out from a conclusion from this particular thing that for most people it could be considered murder. However,
but why it's saying man, not woman?
Okay, so the word Adam is generally it's a good question. Adam doesn't really mean man; it means a person. Good question, but Adam actually means a person. We're told that the first man was called, over here they could translate it as a human, which is actually not a bad idea, because the word Adam, it is, when it wants to talk about a man, sometimes, usually when it doesn't, we'll say an ish or an isha, there's no word for a person. The only word you could say for a person is a nefesh, a soul. But otherwise, it's either a man, Adam, or ish or isha. So either when you usually when you're referring to that, it would be both. So if you look at the previous one, God is telling us, it's just in fact in the over here he uses the word ish, telling us that we're not allowed to kill. Over there he uses the word ish, a man. But over there, once again, even though it says the word ish, which means a male man, it also it's got the same translation as a humankind. So it says over here, but your own life, blood, I will require reckoning. I will require it of every beast of humankind too. I will require reckoning for human life of everyone or for each other. So that's telling us that we're not allowed to murder and there's death penalty for murder. Okay, so I know this is a bit heavy for most people to see this thing, but that's the way it seems to be implied. However, it's not that simple. Okay, this is possibly the way some people would look at it, and that's the way it seems to be implied by most people, that it's talking about a fetus and therefore it's forbidden. However, it gets a bit more a bit different over here. We have another verse in the Torah that tells us an interesting story. This is later on in the Torah, in Exodus, in the book of Exodus of Shmot, and chapter 21, verse 22. It tells us a story. Well, it's not a story; it's a law. But it says, if you had two men, two men that are fighting, v'nakfu isha hara, and they struck a pregnant lady. Now, this is very clearly talking about a pregnant lady. And her children went out. B'lo yihyeh ason. But there's no other damages caused to the woman. In other words, the woman herself has not been harmed. Anosh yanosh, he shall surely be punished. The one responsible should be anosh. Anosh means he should be fined, and the payment is given to the husband, and it should be again based on that reckoning. There's a certain way of how they're going to calculate what the value is. So what does that seem to imply? This first of all, this is particularly the way we would see it as regards to Jewish people. That this law does not necessarily apply to non-Jews. So we're going to leave that aside for now. This is talking about if you have two Jewish men that are fighting, and there happens to be a woman over there, and one of them by mistake hits the woman. And as a result of hitting the woman, he causes that woman to have a miscarriage. What's the law? Is that man, what does he have to pay? Says the Torah, the woman was not hurt per se, only her baby was hurt. Of course, that is, I'm sure, very hurtful to the woman, but doesn't actually cause physical damage. Therefore, the person only has to pay a fine. Now, the Talmud, and I don't have the Talmud open over here right now, but the Talmud asks a question. Why? This is obvious. The Talmud says something about this man. Of course, the man doesn't have to pay because it's not considered liable for death penalty. Because the woman, the fetus is only considered like a limb of her body. And therefore, if somebody damages by mistake, cuts or hurts or breaks off the limb of somebody's body for some mistake, the punishment is a fine. So just like the punishment for a limb of a person's body is a fine, the same thing is over here. Okay? So therefore, some commentaries based on this will come out and say that a child is a fetus in a womb is not considered a life of its own. It's only considered similar to a limb of a person's body. Okay, so we're just now opening what we've seen is two different ways of how to look at this. On the one hand, we see the text that seems to imply that it's considered murder. And therefore, the punishment is the same punishment as murder. We have another text that seems to imply, no, it's just a limb of the woman. And the Talmud goes on further to state that if the child was less than 40 days from conception, it's not even considered. It's not even considered to be a fetus, and he doesn't have to pay a fine. It's considered simply like a fluid. In other words, it's only considered the status of a limb of the woman after 40 days from conception. But if it's prior to 40 days of conception, it's not. Okay? Because the Torah only considers it a viable child from the Talmud only after 40 days. Okay? So, does anybody want to comment? I saw you wanted to say something. Yes.
What I don't understand, you say if a woman is not physically hurt, she is not hurt. Why is mental hurt not as important as physical hurt? The pain is the same or even worse.
Okay. I'm not exactly sure I understand your question, to be totally honest.
If I call people names and I put them down, I don't physically hurt them, but they might feel really awful and hurt and feel depressed for the time being. Why is that kind of pain at a lower level than physical pain?
So who says it is? What's the question coming from? So explain to me why you're asking this question. I'm not exactly understanding it.
If you hurt her limb, the fetus, then it's just a limb, so don't worry about it.
It didn't say don't worry about that. It just says you only have to pay a fine. You don't have to get the death penalty. So the law is that if you murder somebody, and there's warning or there's whatever, there's different penalties for harming somebody's body, causing harm to somebody's body, and murdering somebody, whether it's accidental or on purpose, right? So therefore, if we're going to consider it murder, it falls into the category of murder. If we're going to consider it as damaging somebody, it falls in the category of damaging somebody. So what we're understanding from the second verse, it's on the context of damaging somebody. Now, you're asking a further question, not connected to abortion necessarily, but a general question, which is, if somebody damages somebody or hurts somebody emotionally or mentally, that is just as much damage, or sometimes more, or whatever it is, than physical damage. And in answer to your question, the answer is that you're correct. At times, it could be just as damaging. However, and not only that, and therefore the Torah sometimes does. The Torah talks about certain times when there is actually a punishment for doing emotional damage. Okay, it's just a very difficult thing to put into context. I know that courts do it, and they'll have one person do the same thing to different people. One could get sued for $1 million, another can get sued for $50. So it's a very difficult thing to measure. The Torah tries to give a little bit of like a general way of looking at it, so that almost makes it more clear. But the answer is you're correct. It's just this particular thing is we're focusing on the damage done to the woman. So are you asking though that the woman is also suffering from emotional damage as a result of losing a child? Is that your question?
Correct. And that to me is a major crime. It's a major event in a woman's life. And I get the impression it's just dismissed as in, oh, well, she was not physically harmed, so don't worry about it. Is that the right impression?
Okay, I understand. So first, let me say that I do understand why you may have got that impression. However, I would say that it's not the correct impression, but it's that you would have been justified in getting that impression based on what the text that I gave, because we've only spoken of a very legal perspective. So from a very legal perspective, I can understand what I've just spoken about. You would say the Torah doesn't seem to be being applying or connecting anything to the woman's emotions or how the person feels. What can I say about that? What I can say about that is that it's a very difficult thing to evaluate, to put. The Torah doesn't really get much into emotions and feelings in general. The Torah doesn't, as in feelings and emotions are very important and there's certain times we're actually obligated to serve God with passion and with feeling, and to love our fellow person, and to treat people and not to hurt people, and to treat people with love, and to love our children, etc., etc. Those are commandments that we have in the Torah. Do we have a clear way of saying this is the damage that is done for emotional damage? There is a system. It's called boishes. Okay, there's 5 different methods of what are paid back, and the Talmud specifies that, and based on verses in the Torah that will specify what is paid when somebody hurts somebody emotionally. Okay, but it's beyond today's scope of discussion. So,
but a question.
Yes.
We're saying before 40 days, we will not consider a body. So if it happened before 40 days, it's one measurement, and after 40 days, it's sort of another measurement.
Yes. So that's what it would seem quite clearly from the Talmud. So from the Talmud, from the Talmud, it would seem quite clear that if an abortion is going to happen, it should definitely happen within the first 40 days. After the first 40 days, it becomes very, very complicated. As in what I'm saying is that according to almost all opinions, it's not considered murder if it happens within the first 40 days, because according to almost Talmudic opinions, I'm not going into scientific or whatever it is, because even within science, it's very difficult to understand it. Within the first 40 days, the person is not, the baby is not considered a baby or a child. And therefore, there would be room for an abortion from a Jewish perspective. Okay? Nevertheless, it doesn't mean that it's okay, and it doesn't mean that it's allowed.
That's okay. It's understandable, but that's.
But so I want to make that very clear. If we're going to talk about now, going forward, we're going to talk about when Jewish law may allow for abortion. the principle remains that still abortion is not, in general, is not allowed. Okay. My wife sent me a message saying that according to some scientific studies, saying that the first 40 days is actually no heartbeat, usually. So there you're seeing how the Torah is talking about something, it's thousands of years old, and of course it knows the makeup of a person. And scientifically, it would always have to fit with the Torah. But in the Torah decides that the person is not considered anything, the fetus is not considered anything before the first 40 days. Okay, so much so, I'll give you just another example. So much so, it says that for the first 40 days after a child is conceived, right, you can pray for the gender. In other words, you can pray for what type of gender you want. But after 40 days, you can't. In other words, there's no point because the gender's already been decided. Now, I don't know how that works scientifically, but what I am saying is that it's telling us that things have not been set in stone. The child is not properly formulated within the first 40 days, and you could pray for change. We're told that, we're told that the child is of different circumstances within the first 40 days. That does not mean, what that does not mean is that we're allowed to choose whether to abort or not within the first 40 days. It does mean that if somebody were to have an issue that could possibly require abortion, and we'll talk about them, then ideally it should be done within the first 40 days. That's what it does mean. Now, I don't think that anybody would argue with that. Even in secular, even within Christian religious things where they generally are against abortion, I think everyone agrees that the earlier the better, both for the health of the mother and for the health of the child being less, and it's much more evasive the earlier on it's done. Okay, we also know that if somebody, God forbid, were to go through a miscarriage, if a person loses a child within the first 30 to 40 days, according to halacha, it's not even considered necessarily a miscarriage. What that means is there's certain times that it's a bit of a complicated thing, but for example, for a firstborn male child, but in order to do redemption of the firstborn, it has to be a first child. If there's been a miscarriage, then that child is not necessarily considered the firstborn. However, if the miscarriage within the first 40 days, it's not considered a miscarriage. So you're seeing all these different things, how the child is not considered viable within the first 40 days, and therefore the law is very different. But it's still obviously it's not allowed to abort in general. And that what we're seeing from all these texts is as follows, and I'll just confirm. Leon, can you hear us? Hello? Can you hear us? You seem to be struggling over there.
You gotta unmute yourself, Leon.
He's struggling to connect. He can't connect the audio. Okay. So what's very clear, what comes out of all this? What comes out of all of this is that we're not allowed to do an abortion in general. However, not necessarily is it considered murder. That's the question. Is it going to be considered murder? Are you allowed to abort? The answer would generally be no. Okay. So that's the point number one. That's stage number one that we've come to a conclusion. Stage number two is on understanding what are the exceptions and when could it possibly be allowed. So to answer this question, we're going to look at a few other examples. There's three what we've known as the three cardinal sins. What are the three cardinal sins? There's three sins that the Torah says that you should rather, generally the principle is as follows. If you're faced with a case of somebody puts a gun to your head, God forbid, if somebody puts a gun to somebody's head and says, I want you to transgress this sin. If not, I'm going to kill you. God forbid. The law is that the person should rather transgress the sin and not be killed. Because the Torah was given, says the Torah was given to live with it, not to die for it. That's the general principle. Rather transgress than die. However, if a person is faced with one of the three cardinal sins, then the person should rather die than transgress. What are those three sins? There are three categories of sins: idolatry, serving another god. Number two, murder, committing murder. And number three, committing forbidden sexual acts. Committing forbidden sexual acts. That's the third case. So if you have now the forbidden sexual acts is once again a big category. Certain things fit into that category, certain things don't. But definitely things like adultery and incest would fit into that category. One should rather die than commit those acts. That's what Torah law says. Now, when it talks about murder, we know that we're not allowed to murder a person. And if we're given, if somebody says to you, listen, either you're going to kill that person or I'm going to kill you, what's the law? You should rather die than kill that other person. That's the law. However, there's an exception. What happens if somebody is chasing you with a gun? If somebody's chasing you with a gun, then the law is you're allowed to, not only allowed, you're supposed to act in self-defense and stop that person, even if it means killing that other individual. So what's the law is? Are you allowed to kill somebody else? In general, no. You're not allowed to kill somebody else, even at cost of your own risk, unless that other person is what we call a roidef, is causing, it might cause death to you. Therefore, what comes out is if in the case of abortion, all authorities, almost all, there are some exceptions, but almost all authorities would agree that if the woman's life is at risk as a result of the abortion, then the abortion, then the fetus should be as a result of the fetus, and the fetus is putting the child, the mother, at risk, then the mother's life is more important at this stage, and the child is aborted. Now, why? So there's two reasons given, the two opinions. The one reason given is because we say that the child, you're not allowed to kill the fetus. You're not allowed to abort because it's murder, according to the one opinion. So then, according to that opinion, how would you be allowed to do this? They say because the child is like a roidef. The child is like somebody causing her to die. And therefore, as long as the child is not born, the child is now the cause of this person's death. And that's as though she's chasing the person with a gun. She's causing the cause of death. And therefore, we should get rid of the child because that's self-defense. That's the one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that it's the person's life. The child is not considered a life yet. It's just considered a part of the body. And therefore, we're allowed to get rid of a part of the body to save the rest of the body. Clear? So that's the one exception.
I'm sorry, I may be a little bit sidetracked question, but we got three sins. But look, Rabbi Akiva or some other lot of famous Jews die because they decide to be killed or murdered or whatever because they don't want to turn to other religions. Or look, all this persecution in Inquisition, people decide to die rather than converted. Is it become against our law, or how that we can consider that? Sorry, it's a bit sidetrack question.
It is a bit of a sidetrack question, but it's an important question. So I'll answer it either way because it's an important question. So the point is that even though I said that generally we're allowed to transgress rather than break the law, rather than die, there are exceptions. the one exception is if it's going to cause, if it's going to be done publicly. So if they were to come to you privately and say, I want you to, let's say, eat non-kosher, or I'll kill you, you should eat non-kosher rather than get killed. However, if they're publicly doing it, what they're trying to do is they're not trying to just get you to eat non-kosher. They're trying to undermine all of Judaism. And then you actually have an obligation to transgress, to die rather than to transgress. So in the case of Rabbi Akiva, where he was willing to sacrifice his life rather than willing to sacrifice his life rather than stop learning Torah, for example. The reason is because he knew that if he stopped learning Torah, Judaism would cease to exist. He said Jews can't exist without learning Torah. And they're publicly banning it. Therefore, we have to go for publicly put our life at risk. The same thing with the story of Hanukkah. The story of Hanukkah, they were putting idols up. And they said people publicly should bow down. And they were publicly banning bris milah. Then it's different. When it's a public law, and even at risk of your life, then you're obligated to guard against it, even if it's going to be at the cost of your life, because if not for that, you won't have any Judaism left. That's what Rabbi Akiva did. The same thing was, a few weeks ago, we spoke about the previous Rebbe in Russia and how he put his life at risk to make these underground schools, knowing very well that he could possibly lose his life. And many of his followers, many of the Chabad Hasidim were killed because of those underground schools that were made in the Soviet Union.
Okay,
how could they do that?
Well.
The answer is because it was more than just their life. It was more than this that law. It was going to affect all of Jewry and many, many, many more Jews. It wasn't just that one particular law.
So virtually we've got three exceptions plus fourth one. Technically public.
That's it. Public, public, and a public undermining of Judaism, the system of Judaism. Yes.
Cool. Thank
correct. You could add another category to that. That's the except. We usually put it as an exception, or you could add it as another category. Okay. So, yes.
Can I just ask you another question? If you have a little seedling for a tree, it's still a small tree. If you have a little fetus, it is a human, just not fully developed, fully grown, but it is a human.
Who said it's a human?
In my mind, wrong or right as I may be, because all the ingredients, the chromosomes, all the details of a human being is there. Even the soul, I can imagine, maybe not fully developed, is there. Because at conception, it's the male, female, and Hashem. And they all come together and they produce the start of a human life. Okay. So why is Judaism saying at that stage, all the ingredients are there, but it is not a human?
Okay, so you open up a very big, which is really good. It's a great intro into the next part of our discussion. Leon, are you able to hear us now? Or are you still not having sound? Leon and Irene, still no sound. I think they're struggling to hear us. Okay. In answer to your question, I'll say this. Really, there should have been an introduction to our whole discussion. And that is this. When we're talking about abortion in Jewish law, we're trying to phase out our own opinions. What that means is when you look at media and the public discussion around abortion, it's very biased. It's very self-opinionated. The one person says, I believe that a fetus is a fully formed person. The other one person says, I believe that a fetus is nothing and it's all about my decisions, all about what I care about. And the problem with that is, the problem that you have is the problem that you have, that people are making what they think to be the rule. And it's not, if I were to ask people, and I do ask people, and our opinions are really important, but when we discussed last week the concept of democracy in Judaism and Torah law, we explained that Judaism is not a democracy in the sense that everyone has an opinion. It's the experts that have their opinion in the text. So what we're going to say is that, yes, a lot of people may disagree with some of the opinions that we're pointing out today. As myself, I also have particular opinions about this. But we want to try to put our opinions aside for a short while and try to focus on what is Judaism, what does the Torah say about it? And what you'll see, quite fascinatingly, is that certain people will take their own perspectives and use it to use Torah. So I, for example, saw reform or people trying to use this, the particular text, the last text that I gave you, to prove to us, oh, abortion is just, you see, it's only a fine, it's no big deal, and kind of to justify it's a woman's own decision, which is clearly taking that text out of proportion, because the text was talking about a mistake that happened, that somebody accidentally hit a woman, and as a result, the baby came out. The lady miscarriage. It does not talk about if a person purposely goes and kills the fetus. So to learn out from that text that it's okay to do an abortion is a major distortion. That case is clearly talking about an accident that happens. It makes it very clear that they're talking about, and it even gives you background. There's a fight going on, and by mistake, one of the people, by mistake, hits a woman. So that's why it's so important that we have to take our own minds out of this and try to understand what is the Torah saying. And I'm telling you this because just today, when I was doing a little bit of research into this, I decided to understand a little bit of the other side, and a Reform rabbi using this same passage to say, look, it's okay. But how could you do that? Is totally taking things out of context. Right? Hello? Oh, there you are. I could
Hello.
see you. Hello. Your sound is breaking up, but could you hear us?
Finally got in.
Okay, beautiful. Good to see you.
We couldn't work out how to get in.
We could see you, but we couldn't hear a word you were saying.
So
I think there's probably something wrong with your speakers then on your end.
we've gone in on the mobile.
Okay, good.
Sounds like
Excellent.
an internet issue. Sounds like
Thank
an
you.
internet.
Thank you. Okay, so let's continue.
Thanks.
So
Sorry about that.
no problem, no
Can you-
problem. I'll try to keep you
Yes,
it is,
updated
yes.
a bit of
We
what's
have
been.
no idea what.
I'll try to keep you
Listen to
updated. It's a
you
bit of a
through
heavy
our
conversation we've
mobile
had
phone.
so far, but I'll try to keep you informed of what's going on over here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So what we've seen really, if you were to look at the first verse that I showed you, it seems to be very clear in that verse that abortion is forbidden. The second verse only tells us that possibly it's not considered murder. It does not, according to any opinion, tell you that it's okay. The first opinion seems to imply that it's murder and doesn't necessarily apply to Jewish people. Although, I can tell you this, the Rambam and most opinions say that it is considered a murder to a certain degree, as long as it's after 40 days. Within the first 40 days, as I mentioned, it's according to almost all opinions, it's not considered murder. According to all opinion, or almost all opinions, as far as I understand. However, there are exceptions. Now, when we're talking about whether or not the person is considered, a fetus is considered alive or not, it's an interesting discussion. We have to, for a moment, take out, if you're following, for example, the discussions that are going on amongst progressive people, you would probably say, oh, it's not alive anymore, and we're not hurting anybody that's there to suffer. And therefore the focus would be, on the person that's there, their feelings. My feeling is I want to pursue a career, or I'm not emotionally capable of having this child, and I'm or a person who was, God forbid, raped. They don't want to have their rapist child. All these type of examples, and therefore the person may feel like they don't want to have it, but the focus is on the person's choice. Then you hear the more conservative point of view, which is more of a Christian perspective. And you have to understand, the Christians actually retranslate, when you see them translating that pasuk that I read to you before, some major Christian translators actually translate it as that person has committed murder, and they mistranslate it. So it's important to be aware of that. Nevertheless, most Jewish authorities would agree with the fact that it could be considered murder. However, most opinions would say that it's not that simple, which means, number one, I've already explained to you, conception. Number two exception is if the child is going to cause the mother, possibly putting the mother's life at risk, then it would be a lie. Now, what's important to remember, and really important point, is that whenever there's an allowance to have an abortion, it has to be discussed with a very competent rabbi. There's no general rules. There's no blanket rules, and that we could apply to ourselves. Okay, those times are generally exceptions. Now, the last point that I wanted to make, while we're talking about what we're talking about, is this.
Yeah.
In Jewish law, there's a bit of a discussion about whether or not, when we consider a child to be born, and to be alive, when is a child alive? And I know this is going to be a bit difficult for most of you. Some opinions say that it's from conception. Most opinions say that the child is considered to be a limb of the mother from 40 days on. Some would say that it's from 40 days on, the person is considered their own person. However, there's two other, I want to give you, I don't have in front of me the text, but there's two other Talmudic sources that I want to point out to you. The first one tells us the following. It says that if there's a case where a woman is guilty of committing some type of crime that has a death penalty to it, and this woman is pregnant, the Talmud says the woman is killed before she has the child, even if she's in her 9th month. We don't wait for the child to be born. Now, what's strange is the child never did anything wrong. The child should be, let her have the child, let the child live, and then the woman be put to death. By the way, putting a woman to death was something very rare, but you have to understand the idea of it. It teaches us a lot more. The child, we're told, so the Talmud asks that question. The understanding is no. The reason why we put the mother and the child to death, the mother is killed first, is because the child is considered a limb of the mother, and therefore it doesn't have its own life force. Now I'll tell you another text from the Talmud. The other text from the Talmud says the following. If we are, now the law is on Shabbos, generally we're not allowed to break the Shabbos unless it's to save a life or to save a part of the body, to save a life. So the Talmud says, what happens if you come across a pregnant woman that has somehow died? Let's say building collapsed and hit her on the head, or something else, God forbid. I know these particular circumstances are cases that we don't like talking about, but we're trying to look at them from an academic perspective, not from an emotional perspective, right? Because they're gruesome a bit. And says, in particular this case, it says what you should do is you're allowed to break Shabbos, desecrate the Shabbos by cutting open the woman's womb, doing a cesarean to see if you can save the child. The question I asked is why? The child is seemingly just a limb of the mother. So therefore, and the mother has already passed away. So, okay. So why am I bringing you these two cases? To show you how complex the situation is. And what we gain from all this knowledge is the following. It's interesting that when we look at the concept of abortion, there's no real clear guidelines besides for that first verse that I showed you right at the beginning. I'll share it with you again, which seems to imply it says over here, shafach dam hadam ba'adam, damo yishafach. This law seems to imply that it stays for, at least for Gentile people, that we should by all circumstances not allow abortion in general, unless it's considered some type of murder. So this law seems to be what majority of the authorities will hold by, that when it comes to actually causing death to a fetus, it would be forbidden, and according to some opinions, even murder. But not necessarily for, will a person be held liable? And here's the thing, will it not be considered murder as in the penalties of murder? So when I said to you before, and why I'm bringing this to you again, when I said to you before that there's 3 sins that we're supposed to transgress, according to most opinions, abortion is not considered the same category as murder, that we have to sacrifice our lives to overcome. So what that means is that we have to look at abortion from, this is my understanding of all these texts and all these things that I've brought you. In general, we should understand that a child from after 40 days after conception is considered to be some type of living organism, and at the very least, is considered a part of the person's body. And just like we wouldn't easily go and cut off a person's and amputate a part of a person's body, we should be as hesitant when it comes to abortion. In other words, don't go and point fingers at people and say murder, but if a person would be willing to amputate almost a part of their body, that's when you could say that it's okay. In other words, when do we amputate a person's body part? We amputate a person's body part if it's there to save the life. If it's not there to save the life, if it's not going to save the life, then why does that body part not considered important? So therefore, it doesn't necessarily mean physical life force only. There are times that certain rabbis, and not all rabbis, but there have been certain rabbis at Tzitz Eliezer and Rav Shechter from YU University had allowed for abortion because they believed one or two things, that the stress that the child was going to give was going to be overbearing and might cause further damage to the family and could be almost like a death sentence. And that's why it has to be discussed, and therefore it could be possibly allowed. And definitely if it was going to cause the major health issues to the mother, that could be allowed. Now, what you find as a result of this, if you look into the religious families, into the religious Orthodox Jewish world, at least the Haredi Jewish world, ultra-Orthodox, you will find that we have a higher percentage of children with special needs in our families in general. Now, the reason for that is because most special needs are testable while still in utero, before the child is born. And in most cases, even religious Christians would opt to abort those children if they're not going to be healthy, if they're Down syndrome, or if they have other type of issues. However, Jewish law, if you're following strict Jewish law, most people would rather say that you're not allowed to abort those children because of this. And this is the last principle that I want to say over tonight. The principle is this: nobody knows the value of a life. What that means is, in the secular world, life is looked at as what type of quality it's giving me. There's a concept called quality of life, which means that life is worthwhile if it's being enjoyed and the other people around you are enjoying it. That's the way the secular world looks at it. In Jewish world, we don't care. Remember I mentioned earlier, we don't really care about the way people feel. In other words, we care about how you feel, but that's not the way we're going to decide laws. That's not the way how we're going to make major decisions. Because if we started making decisions based on the way people feel, this person has one feeling, that person has another feeling, this person decides that I feel like my child is alive, and therefore this, and that person feels like I feel like my child's not alive, and therefore it's okay for me to. If we're going to be based on feelings, Judaism will always be changing, and there'll be nothing here, and we won't exist in 50 years. There will be nothing left, and there's nothing real to it. True Judaism has to be beyond feelings. And life is beyond feelings. What that means is it doesn't make a difference, really, if a person is having a good life or not. A life is a life. Because you go up to him and say that person's suffering, let me go and kill them, and that person's having a good life, I'll go and murder them, that's not okay. If you look at the Nazis, the first people that they killed were people that they quote unquote weren't having a good life. Special needs people that are mentally retarded in their mind and had all types of issues. The first people, even before the Jews, they killed people with health issues and mental issues because they decided that's not even a life. So what I want to say is this: we shouldn't be classifying people as murderers. And if God forbid somebody for some reason has to have an abortion, we should encourage them to try to speak to a rabbi and someone that can give them the impression of the importance of having that child. And more importantly, try to find a way to support those people through that pregnancy and help them to understand the importance and also to appreciate what a life is. And if that person is not going to be able to take care of that life, it's okay to put a child up for adoption rather than abort the pregnancy from a Jewish perspective. 100%. And even if it's going to put the child, the woman through stress and throw her career off, that life, just because it's your career and that life, it's a difficult decision. But we have to do whatever we can to try to help people to be able to make the decision to keep the child. But by calling people's names murderers and things like that, we're not helping anybody. We're just turning people off. It's never helpful. So therefore, what we're seeing is that a life in Judaism is not dependent on what type of quality it has. A life is just because it is. You could have a person that has dementia and doesn't even remember their children's names. That person, we're not allowed to kill them. It's considered murder to kill them. Why? That person, by being alive, has a purpose. Are they enjoying life? I don't know. Somebody could be suffering in pain. The very fact that they're alive is only God can choose to take away that life. I'll finish off with one story which is not directly connected to this concept, but it's kind of connected. There's a story with the great Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, the great rabbi, the author of the Mishnah, that towards the end of his life, he was suffering for a very long time, terrible pains. And it was before the date of painkillers and all those other type of things. And when a person was suffering, they would suffer bad. And his students, who loved him very much, were praying for his recovery. And he had a pious maidservant, and she believed that he was suffering too much. So she went to the study hall where they were praying, They were praying downstairs and he was upstairs from the way I remember. And she took a glass and she threw it and she started a whole commotion. And when she started the commotion, the students went outside to see what's this commotion. And during that time, they stopped their circle of prayers. And as a result, their teacher died. And he was almost being supported by the prayers. The Talmud looks back and said, what this person did was good. What she did was good. What do you mean she did? You could say she killed him. No, she didn't kill him. She stopped those prayers which were keeping him alive and suffering in that sense. And of course, generally we pray for people when they're not well. And the prayer is that they should no longer suffer. But we could never physically do what we would call an act of God by causing the person to death. Can we stop, or we could pray for a person to die when a person's suffering? If that's what it's come to, possibly. But could we actually do euthanasia? Or could we actually abort a child? In most cases, the answer is no. But there can be exceptions in certain circumstances. Okay? I hope I have clarified that. If anybody wants to add anything or question anything, you're welcome to now.
Yashar Koach, thank you very much. Good shiur. Laila tov. Thank you.
Laila tov. Thank you, Noach. Thanks for joining.
Bye.
Thank you. It's a good topic, but it's very confusing, to be honest.
Okay. If you have any questions and I can clarify something, I'm happy to try.
Look,
but I can't promise.
Because what is the beauty of Judaism and why we survived for so long? Because we've got a Torah, we've got really strong beliefs what we follow. When we start wavering and choosing, feeling, and this and that, we are going out of what Torah teaches. But in this subject, it is yes, we want to do this, but it's just like a little bit of pregnant. We do a bit, but we're not really. And it's sort of a, look, it's a very interesting subject. Look, I understood what we are talking about, but it's also what we start conversation. It is so many things which is really confusing. But anyway, thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'm glad that you said that it's confusing because I could, to be honest, I'm a bit confused myself on this subject. And I just gave that a bit over to you, not to confuse you, but to allow you to see that it's not such a straightforward subject.
Agreed, absolutely.
I think
thank you very much.
Understand that Judaism is a bit complex. It's not always straightforward. It's a bit subtle and what's the right word? There's a word that I'm thinking of. That it's nuanced. That's what I want to say. It's nuanced. Judaism is nuanced. It's not black and white. Nothing in Judaism is black and white usually. So the confusion is good because it's allowing us to see that things are not. It's not like Republicans and it's yes and no straightforward. There's much more nuance to everything in Judaism.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask you
good night.
Thank you. Good night, Sam. Thank you. Thank you for joining. Yes, Chris, if you want, you can ask.
Yeah, you did touch on tonight, but can you just clarify if somebody is raped and extremely upset and depressed about it, is that a circumstance that you can say abortion is appropriate?
Okay. The answer in general would be no, but every circumstance has to be taken in consideration. I would think that you would have to say that you'd have to go to a psychiatrist, and you'd have to go to a rabbi that truly understands the circumstance to see what does it mean the person's extremely upset. Is the person suicidal, or are they saying they're suicidal? Sometimes people say they're suicidal and therefore they're just saying that so they can get some type of a heter, permission to do something, but they're not really. So people would have to be assessed. But if somebody was truly suicidal as a result of the abortion, maybe their boyfriend is going to kill them. Sometimes there has been cases when boyfriends have threatened people's lives as a result of it, and that's obviously a bigger problem than just the pregnancy. The boyfriend's a serious problem. But sometimes it causes so much stress, the person, they can't handle it. It's in general, you would say no, but are there extreme circumstances that we could say yes, possibly?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, very good, Shiur.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I'm glad we got you on finally, Leon and Irene.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good
All
night.
right,
you.
all
Good
the
night.
best.
Bye,
Good
everybody.
night
Bye.
to
Good night.
everybody. Good night.
Good night.